Prince Joachim's shocking return to Denmark, the royal comeback that could destroy King Frederik, why this isn't just a family reunion. Welcome to B News. What happens when the exiled prince returns home, and his arrival threatens to expose everything the monarchy has been desperately hiding? In a stunning announcement that has sent shockwaves through the Danish royal establishment and ignited fierce speculation about what's really happening behind palace walls, Prince Joachim, King Frederik's younger brother who has been living in self-imposed exile in Washington, D.C. since the explosive title-stripping scandal of 2022, will reportedly return to Denmark in January 2026. But according to explosive reports from royal insiders and sources close to both brothers, this isn't the warm family reconciliation that palace press releases are trying to portray. This is Prince Joachim coming back to settle scores, to demand answers and accountability for how his children were treated, to reclaim his position within the Danish royal family, and potentially to challenge his brother's authority and fitness to rule. The timing is no coincidence. January 2026 will mark exactly 2 years since Frederik became king following their mother Queen Margrethe's abdication, making it a symbolic moment for Joachim to return and reassert himself. But here's the truly explosive part that has palace lawyers and communications teams in crisis mode. Sources claim Joachim is not returning alone or empty-handed. He's bringing documentation, communications records, and testimony that allegedly prove the title stripping was not Queen Margrethe's decision at all but rather was orchestrated by Frederik himself as a calculated move to eliminate competition and ensure his own children's absolute primacy in the royal hierarchy. Before we expose every explosive detail about Prince Joachim's return, reveal the evidence he's allegedly bringing that could prove King Frederik betrayed his own family, and uncover why palace insiders are calling this the most dangerous threat to the Danish monarchy since the affair scandal, you absolutely must smash that subscribe button and turn on all notifications because this story is developing rapidly and could literally determine whether Frederik survives as king or whether Denmark faces an unprecedented royal crisis. And here's what we need from you immediately. Drop a comment telling us whether you believe Prince Joachim has the right to return and challenge his brother publicly, or whether he should put family unity and institutional stability above his personal grievances. Can you ever truly forgive a family member who hurt your children, or are some betrayals unforgivable? Let us know because this question is at the heart of what's about to unfold in Denmark. Now let's expose the complete truth about Prince Joachim's return and what it means for the future of Denmark's royal family. To understand the full significance and explosive potential of Prince Joachim's planned return to Denmark in January 2026, we need to revisit the original crisis that drove him into what many observers have characterized as exile and that has poisoned his relationship with his brother King Frederik and the broader Danish royal establishment. The crisis erupted in September 2022 when Queen Margrethe II, then still reigning monarch, announced a shocking decision that stunned Denmark and the royal family itself. Effective January 1, 2023, 4 of her grandchildren, Prince Joachim's children Count Nikolai then 23, Count Felix then 20, Count Henrik then 13, and Countess Athena then 10, would lose their Her Highness titles and Princess designations, becoming simply Counts and Countess with reduced formal status within the royal hierarchy. The official justification, as we've previously covered, emphasized modernization and streamlining the monarchy to focus on the direct line of succession. Queen Margrethe framed the decision as giving these young people more freedom to live normal lives without royal constraints. However, the manner in which the decision was announced, with minimal warning given to Prince Joachim and none to his children, and the immediate public backlash suggested this was far more problematic than a simple administrative adjustment. Prince Joachim broke royal protocol spectacularly by speaking to media outlets and expressing his shock, hurt, and anger at the decision. He described his children as being harmed and put in impossible situations where they had to explain to friends and classmates why they had suddenly been demoted. He said he was given only 5 days' notice before the public announcement, leaving no time for proper family discussion or preparation. Most devastatingly, Prince Joachim made clear that he believed the decision was not really about modernization or helping his children but rather about ensuring that Crown Prince Frederik's children, Christian, Isabella, Vincent, and Josephine, faced no competition or confusion about royal hierarchy. By stripping Joachim's children of their royal status while Frederik's children retained all titles and privileges, the decision created a stark distinction between the king's line, Frederik's family, and the increasingly marginalized junior line, Joachim's family. Joachim's public statements, while carefully worded to avoid directly accusing his brother, carried clear implications that Frederik had supported or even pushed for this decision to benefit his own children at the expense of Joachim's. The aftermath of the title stripping scandal was severe and lasting. Public opinion in Denmark was sharply divided, with many sympathizing with Joachim's children and criticizing the decision as cruel and poorly handled. Queen Margrethe eventually issued a rare apology, not for the decision itself but for how it was communicated and implemented, acknowledging that the process had caused more pain than necessary. However, the damage was done. Prince Joachim's relationship with his mother became severely strained. His relationship with his brother Frederik, which had reportedly been cordial if not particularly close before the scandal, became cold and distant. And Joachim began making arrangements to leave Denmark, accepting a position as defense attaché at the Danish embassy in Washington, D.C., effective summer 2023. Joachim's move to Washington was officially characterized as a diplomatic posting, part of his service to Denmark in his capacity as a prince and military officer. However, many observers interpreted it as voluntary exile, Joachim removing himself and his family from Denmark to avoid the constant reminders of how his children had been treated, to escape the awkwardness of remaining in a country where his position had been so publicly diminished, and to distance himself from a royal family that he felt had betrayed him. His wife Princess Marie, French-born and perhaps less attached to Denmark than someone with deeper roots might be, supported the move, and their family began building a new life in the United States, far from the Danish royal court and the brother who had apparently prioritized his own children's status over family loyalty. Throughout 2023, 2024, and 2025, Prince Joachim has maintained only minimal contact with the Danish royal family and has made only brief, necessary appearances in Denmark for unavoidable family occasions. His attendance at his mother Queen Margrethe's abdication ceremony in January 2024 was notable primarily for how brief and formal his interactions with Frederik appeared to be. His attendance at subsequent family events has been similarly minimal and perfunctory. He has built a life in Washington, his children have adapted to American schools and lifestyles, and for all practical purposes, Prince Joachim has removed himself from active participation in the Danish royal family despite technically remaining a prince of Denmark with his position in the line of succession intact. Against this backdrop of separation, bitterness, and unresolved family conflict, the announcement that Prince Joachim will return to Denmark in January 2026 is extraordinary and requires explanation. According to official statements from the Danish embassy in Washington and brief palace communications, Joachim's posting as defense attaché will conclude at the end of 2025, and he will return to Denmark in January 2026 to resume residence and presumably take on whatever royal duties and responsibilities are deemed appropriate for a prince who is the king's brother and fifth in line to the throne after Frederik's 4 children. The official framing emphasizes normalcy, a diplomatic posting ending, a prince returning home, a family being reunited. Palace communications carefully avoid any acknowledgement of the tensions and conflicts that have defined Joachim's relationship with his family for the past 3 years. However, sources close to Prince Joachim speaking to European media outlets paint a dramatically different picture of his motivations for returning and what he intends to do once back in Denmark. According to these sources, Joachim is not returning because his diplomatic posting ended. He could potentially have sought extension or another international posting if he simply wanted to stay away from Denmark. He is returning deliberately and with specific purposes that go far beyond just resuming normal royal life. He is coming back to confront his brother, to demand accountability for decisions made in 2022 that destroyed his children's royal status, to reclaim his position within the Danish royal family rather than accepting permanent marginalization, and potentially to challenge Frederik's authority and leadership if he cannot get satisfactory answers and acknowledgement of the wrong that was done. Most explosively, sources claim that Joachim has spent his time in Washington not just performing diplomatic duties but also gathering evidence, documentation, and testimony related to the title stripping decision. These materials allegedly include communications between Frederik and Queen Margrethe from the period before the announcement, discussions among palace staff and advisors about the decision and its implementation, and testimony from individuals with knowledge of the internal deliberations that allegedly prove Frederik was not a passive participant in his mother's decision but rather an active advocate who pushed for stripping his brother's children of their titles specifically to benefit his own children's positions. If Joachim possesses credible evidence supporting these allegations, and if he chooses to release or use this evidence publicly, it would be devastating for Frederik personally and potentially catastrophic for the monarchy institutionally. The timing of Joachim's return, January 2026, exactly 2 years after Frederik became king, is being interpreted by royal observers as deliberately symbolic. 2 years represents a meaningful milestone, long enough for Frederik to have established his reign but not so long that patterns and approaches have become completely fixed. By returning at this specific moment, Joachim is allegedly signaling that he is making a statement about Frederik's first 2 years as king, asserting his right to return and reclaim his position, and potentially positioning himself as an alternative voice or focal point for those who have doubts about Frederik's leadership. The January timing also means that Joachim will return shortly after the royal family's Christmas 2025 celebrations, potentially bringing fresh tensions and complications into the new year rather than allowing any holiday goodwill or family reconnection to develop naturally. The specific logistics of Joachim's return, where he will live, what duties he will perform, how he will be supported financially, and what his relationship with Frederik and the royal household will look like, are reportedly still being negotiated and are sources of significant tension. Joachim presumably will need a residence, either in one of the royal properties or in a private home that meets security and dignity requirements for a prince. He will need staff and support appropriate to his position. He will need some form of income or allowance, as he will no longer be receiving diplomatic salary and presumably cannot simply live on private wealth alone. And he will need clarity about what role, if any, he will play in representing the monarchy and performing royal duties. Each of these practical questions becomes complicated by the underlying family tensions and Joachim's apparent intentions to challenge rather than simply reintegrate into the royal establishment. If Joachim expects to be given a prominent position, generous financial support, and significant responsibilities, essentially treating him as a valued senior member of the royal family, but Frederik and the palace view him as a problematic figure who needs to be managed and contained, the resulting conflicts could become very public very quickly. Conversely, if Joachim is offered minimal support, limited roles, and is essentially sidelined or ignored, it will fuel his sense of being wronged and marginalized and will likely push him toward more public confrontation and criticism. The impact of Joachim's return on Queen Mary is particularly interesting to consider. Mary has maintained cordial but not particularly close relationships with Joachim and Princess Marie throughout her years in the Danish royal family. However, as someone who herself has experienced feeling marginalized, betrayed, and heard within royal contexts through the affair scandal and its aftermath, Mary might actually have some sympathy for Joachim's position and feelings even if she cannot publicly express it. Additionally, if Joachim's evidence and testimony regarding the title stripping implicates Frederik as having been deceptive or manipulative with his own family, it could complicate Mary's efforts to rebuild trust with Frederik and could raise questions about whether Frederik's betrayals extend beyond marital infidelity to include betrayals of family loyalty and honesty. The 4 children of Frederik and Mary, Christian, Isabella, Vincent, and Josephine, will be directly affected by their uncle's return in ways both practical and emotional. Prince Christian, as crown prince and future king, represents everything that was prioritized over Joachim's children through the title stripping. If Joachim harbors resentment, as seems likely, Christian may become a focal point for that resentment even though Christian bears no personal responsibility for decisions made about his cousins. The relationship between Christian and his cousins Nikolai and Felix, now 26 and 24, significantly older than Christian's 19, has reportedly been affected by the title controversy, with awkwardness and reduced contact where once there might have been warmer cousin relationships. Joachim's own children and their response to returning to Denmark, assuming they accompany their father, which is unclear, will be important factors in how this situation develops. Nikolai, Felix, Henrik, and Athena have spent formative years living in Washington, adapting to American life, and building identities separate from their former royal status. Returning to Denmark means confronting the country and royal establishment that stripped them of their titles and that treated them, in their perception, as expendable. Whether they return with their father or choose to remain in the United States, the older ones are adults who can make independent decisions, will signal something about their relationship with Denmark and the royal family. If they return and are visibly bitter or resentful, it creates additional complications. If they choose not to return, it underscores the permanent damage done to their connection with their home country and royal heritage. The question of what exactly Prince Joachim wants to achieve through his return is crucial to understanding what might happen. Several possibilities exist, each with different implications. One possibility is that Joachim genuinely wants reconciliation and proper reintegration into the royal family, but on terms that acknowledge the wrong done to his children and that provide him with appropriate status and responsibilities. In this scenario, Joachim is returning with demands but is ultimately willing to be satisfied if those demands are met and if he receives appropriate acknowledgement, apologies, and treatment. This would be the scenario most amenable to resolution, though it would still require Frederik and the palace to make concessions that they have so far been unwilling to make. A second possibility is that Joachim wants revenge or justice more than reconciliation, and that his primary goal is to expose Frederik's alleged role in the title stripping and to damage his brother's reputation and position, even if it also damages the monarchy more broadly. In this scenario, Joachim has concluded that reconciliation is impossible or undesirable, and he is willing to engage in open conflict even knowing it will have destructive consequences for the institution and the family. This would be the most dangerous scenario for the monarchy, as it could lead to public accusations, release of damaging evidence, and a permanent fracturing of the royal family that plays out in media coverage and public discourse. A third possibility is that Joachim's motivations are mixed and evolving, and that what happens will depend on how Frederik and the palace respond to his return. If Joachim is welcomed warmly, treated respectfully, given appropriate roles and support, and perhaps receives some form of acknowledgement or apology for past wrongs, he might be willing to move forward constructively. If he is cold-shouldered, marginalized, or treated as a threat to be contained rather than a family member to be embraced, his response might become more confrontational and aggressive. This scenario suggests that the next several months are crucial and that decisions made by Frederik, Mary, palace advisors, and Joachim himself will determine whether this becomes a reconciliation story or a destructive conflict. The constitutional and institutional implications of a public, bitter conflict between the king and his brother cannot be overstated. Denmark's monarchy, while popular, is not immune to republican sentiment, and a royal family that appears dysfunctional, petty, and unable to maintain basic family relationships would provide powerful ammunition for those arguing that the institution should be abolished. If Prince Joachim publicly accuses his brother the king of lying, manipulation, and betraying family for personal advantage, and if he has evidence supporting those accusations, it would create a crisis of confidence in Frederik's character and fitness to rule that could be very difficult to overcome. The media coverage and public response to Joachim's return will be crucial in shaping the outcome. Danish media, which has generally been respectful of the royal family and cautious about coverage that might damage the institution, will face difficult decisions about how to report on any conflicts or accusations that emerge. If Joachim makes public statements or releases evidence, do media outlets report it extensively, giving his perspective full airing, or do they minimize coverage to protect the monarchy? If they minimize coverage, do they face criticism for protecting power rather than pursuing truth? If they cover it extensively, do they face accusations of sensationalism and disloyalty to Danish institutions? These are not easy questions, and different media outlets may make different choices, creating a complex information environment where multiple narratives compete.